If we're talking about growing up, I didn't want either.
Mhm.
That was not even on the forefront. I played football at the University of Illinois. I was a
Okay.
linebacker there. So I played two sports in college, football and powerlifting.
Okay.
Had three knee surgeries, and I wasn't going to go any further than that. 2005, I got the opportunity to work on a Tyler Perry film.
Hey everyone, it's Sullivan Grace, and we're back with another episode of Empowered and Prepared, which is a visual podcast dedicated to inspiring young people like you to be your very best self. And today we have none other than Troy Pryor. He is the creator of the XL Film Festival, which you should know about if you're an aspiring filmmaker. You probably should have already heard about it, but XL Film Fest is a space for industry professionals to come together and network with each other and just create an immersive experience for audiences to dive into. Troy, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So let's just get a little bit more into your background and your environment growing up. How did your environment as a child impact you creatively?
My background had a huge impact because I was raised in a family full of clergy and community leaders. So I was actually raised to be a minister. I've been in the pulpit since I was 13.
Okay.
And so a lot of what I've been able to do has been because of a comfort level in front of audiences, whether it's public speaking, hosting, anything like that. And I was just fortunate to get into the entertainment industry as an actor first and as a voice actor and get on a couple of boards. But what I saw growing up were leaders. I saw people that knew how to bring communities together, how to build, how to run businesses. And so when I got into the industry as a talent, it was only going to be, so long before I would eventually say, you know what, I need to create my own opportunities. I need to build my own brand. And so I was, blessed to have some examples to use, although those examples were in other spaces. So there was I had to convert the transferable skills.
Yes.
I didn't have anybody in my family that was in entertainment or acting per se. But what I realized was that the things that separated me from a lot of my peers as performers was that I had this other acumen that I could leverage besides my creative talent or my abilities on stage.
Right. So did you always have an aspiration to throw festivals, or did you want to be an actor? What specifically were your aspirations?
If we're talking about growing up, I didn't want either. That was not even on the forefront. I played football at the University of Illinois. I was a linebacker there. So I played two sports in college, football and powerlifting. Had three knee surgeries, and I wasn't going to go any further than that. 2005, I got the opportunity to work on a Tyler Perry film.
Nice.
And that was the first set that I was ever on. So from day one, I was on a Tyler Perry set. And I got to see how he, I always say Quincy Jones, the set, like he was able to, lead and guide everything. To me, that was very reminiscent to seeing church leaders or community leaders. And so, this black man in this role, to me, I'm like, okay, this is consistent. At that time, I hadn't been in the industry enough to know like all of the gaps in DEI, and like I didn't know the industry like that because he was filming Daddy's Little Girls, and they were doing a scene at an apartment complex that my aunt was managing. And this was my sophomore year playing college ball, so that's all I was focused on. And I randomly got put into the scene as an extra, and then wind up having a meeting with Tyler about the industry.
Wow.
And I was like, man, I just came off of a torn ACL. I'm playing college ball, so I got to finish and playing ball. But that let me know that there was potential in this other industry, whatever that may mean. I hadn't invested in. So for me, it was going to be something in sports or in the creative space in some capacity, because I was an artist. I used to sell artwork when I was a kid.
Okay, nice.
So some of that was a part of it, but but I never thought that I'd be an actor. And then once I got into the entertainment industry as a performer, running a festival was never something I was going to do. And I would co-chair and help other festivals build their programs because they had gaps in knowing how to connect with audiences and things like that. And eventually that led to, a couple things led to me one day saying, if I'm going to do this, I want to make sure that it's as strong as possible. And sometimes you got to do it yourself instead of waiting for somebody else.
Yeah, so you talked about working with Tyler Perry so early on in your career in the film industry. How did seeing how he managed the set and just his superpowers when it comes to film inspire you that early on in your career?
For me, it was, I don't want to call it a fluke, but it was like I was background. It was extra. It wasn't like I auditioned for it, but it was great because I got to meet some really cool people. Got a chance to meet Craig Robinson. Shout out Craig Robinson from Chicago.
Okay.
It was a scene with him and Gabrielle Union on a blind date. And he's rapping in the scene. But it, again, because I hadn't had any exposure to a film set before that time, that was just day one. So from that point, I had a lens, a perspective on, okay, here's how things are run. And one of the things I can say after having gotten into the industry and done a bunch of other commercials and things, everyone on that set was treated with the utmost respect.
Wow.
Like I've been on sets and I'm like, yo, this production is treating everybody horribly. Like I didn't, like he created an environment where folks wanted to work and, be there. That was my experience there. And for me, it was just a one day, half a day thing,
right?
But it was enough for me to understand that there were here's some standards. So when I did not see that, when I came back and worked on certain projects, I had already been exposed to what it could be. And so by the time I was on certain sets, I'm like, they don't have to talk to them like that.
Right.
They don't, that group of folks over there don't have to be ostracized. You could treat people with respect. And, I could see the gap. Knowing his journey gave him a level of appreciation for the opportunities, which is probably why he treats people a certain way. There was a certain level of respect and kindness, and you don't always see that.
Yes. And I watched Maxine's Baby, so his documentary was definitely very touching. And you talked about just the fact that you started out on a set. What was that moment that you realized I want to put together my own film festival?
Specifically for a film festival, it wasn't supposed to be that we launched a film festival. We were in the process of working with another festival that had been around for some time. They were having some difficulty building quality programming, but they did have a brand that existed, and we knew their pain points. And so we proposed to them to create a joint venture so we could do it together. This was a Black targeted festival that a lot of people are familiar with, but a lot of people never knew that it was never Black owned. And so that obviously led to some challenges. Now keep in mind, all of this was happening around 2020.
Oh, okay.
2020, 2021.
Yeah.
So it was a period of time where a lot of brands, organizations there was a reckoning.
Right.
And we were like, listen, this has the potential to do some great things, but people are kind of over the performative stuff. And so long story short, we started the deal, they backed out of the deal. And we said, well, let's just keep moving forward with the concept. Okay. Excel was literally just something scratched on paper. It was never supposed to be the name of the festival.
Wow.
It was just a placeholder because it was always supposed to be called this other festival.
Wow.
That it already existed. Wow. And when we ran it and it popped, it was like, Excel kind of rolls off the tongue. It's easy. We can make an easy logo. Let's stick with it.
Love that. What's meant to happen will always happen. So I know XL Film Festival is only a portion of what Creative Cypher is in general, which is your company. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, so Creative Cypher we launched 10 years ago to support Black and Brown storytellers. It was born out of a tech incubator in Pilsen. And we used to do events that would garner a lot of traction. We kept outgrowing spaces and it continued to grow. I quickly realized that the ability to bring people together was great, but I didn't want to just do networking events. So after that ecosystem grew, we started to handpick talent and build out the production wing. So you turn around and you look at all these resources, equipment, studios. We started to produce content. So we launched the entertainment side of it in an effort to showcase the content, because we were dealing with primarily millennial content creators. We knew that we couldn't just tell folks to go watch something.
Right.
So we started producing the events around the content. That led to our event division. And then I quickly started to produce the comedy shows for Soho House, music festivals, because a lot of the resources were transferable from artist to artist. You could be a stand-up comedian, you could be a musician, a spoken word artist, you could be a filmmaker that needs a theater. A lot of the resources were transferable. And at a certain point, I found myself sitting on 13 different boards in Chicago, and usually the youngest and usually the one that was in a gap that organization had. So I was quietly stacking up resources while people were not paying attention. And I was able to take those resources and then build this bank. So that led to me becoming an executive producer on a wide variety of projects. Because if you were a filmmaker and you came to me, I don't even need to see your project. I'm gonna cut out 25% of your overhead off top. I had built a model to where I knew that I was going to save you money. I might not be able to cut you this check, but this money that you're about to spend, you're no longer going to have to spend that. And so I did that for a while, and then the ecosystem grew. As the ecosystem grew, the access to resources grew, which meant the quality of the content I was able to support grew. Then that led to now, okay, I have a festival. So I can program content there. So now we have catalogs of IP. We have a whole lineup of events throughout the year. Excel is our signature event. But we have festivals all throughout the US and the UK. And so a lot of that stemmed from, not from entertainment, it stemmed from understanding people and knowing how to build community.
That's a very important part of it. So when you talked about the boards, you said you were sitting at 13 boards at once. At one time. That's a lot. And you also said that you were the youngest on a lot of these boards. So did you ever encounter some type of imposter syndrome, or how did you maintain your confidence in who you were being the youngest person in some of those rooms?
Yeah, I've still dealt with some of that today. But definitely at that time, I remember one of the boards I was on, the oldest member was a 90-year-old white male on that board. And, a lot of times you're in those situations, you're closest to the answer, furthest from the decision. An organization wants to evolve in some way, and you're not being heard. But you're looking at the answer and you're like, how am I the only person in the room that sees that this is how you all should do it? Or you've been in rooms where you hear that there's a particular goal, but then you look at the steps that are being taken or the steps that are not being taken. And you're like, how do you all expect to achieve that goal? And so a lot of the rooms I was in, it boiled down to things like, we want more Black and brown folks. And I'm like, okay, that's good. Let me see your programming. And then it boils down to, okay, well, you don't see the programming that you want here. I wonder why. Let's look at your leadership. Oh, I see why you don't have the type of programming that would attract the audiences that you say you want. And so it took some time, but what I inevitably had to do was build a lot of things on my own, trial and error, bunch of proof of concepts. And so when I would come back to situations where there was an opportunity to pitch something, I'd have something tangible with some numbers, something to present and say, here's why we should do X, Y, Z. I did this by myself. Imagine what this could look like with your support or collaboration.
For sure. But you overcame it. So a lot of it is networking across and, being good with people and knowing how to communicate. Why do you feel like it's important to network in this industry?
It's a collaborative industry. It's a collaborative world. Anybody that tells you that they made it on their own,
they lie.
It ain't true. There's too many. The level of success that most of us say we want to achieve, it's impossible to do on your own. So that means you got to be a good talent scout. You got to give off and present good energy because you want to attract the right people.
Yep.
Like-minded doesn't always mean that you all are going to agree on everything. You want people that'll challenge you.
Yeah.
You ultimately want to grow. And you can look at the set today. You can walk in any set. You can look at any major motion picture, any Marvel film. The credits go on for 10 minutes. These are all collaborative efforts. If you can't, or if you're challenged to build relationships or network, then it'll be a challenge to progress at the pace that you want to.
Yes, for sure. So you were talking about in your answer, proving yourself. And that's the part that I want to get to. What advice would you give to somebody who's in that stage of feeling like they have to prove themselves? We're all in our early 20s. I'm a young journalist myself. I'm trying to make it. And a lot of times I receive a lot of no's, a lot of people telling me, wait, what's your vision? What do you feel like these people in this stage of proving themselves need to hear when you were in that stage?
So one of the things that I think is critically important is self-care and giving yourself some level of grace. It doesn't mean to not hold yourself accountable. That's something different.
Yes.
But it does mean that when you're starting out, a lot of times you don't have access to stuff. You got a lot of questions. And so, gatekeepers or folks will say, well, we need to see a certain amount of something on your resume.
Yeah.
But then you don't get the opportunity to do it. So you get down on yourself because you're not building up this catalog of work. And it's important to understand like some of that's kind of a part of the journey.
Yeah.
I would strongly advise folks to research others that have, these great success stories.
Yeah.
Like you hear some of their journey and you realize in some cases others have been through harder things.
Yeah.
And they've made it through, but it just gives you some insight. So you don't feel like, okay, this thing that I'm going through is so absurd. No one else understands me.
Yes.
I haven't done it. Like I got to a point where I would listen to certain people that had been successful and I'm like, okay. I see they've gone through this, they went through it. Doesn't mean that you're going to have their same journey.
Right.
It just lets you know that you're not by yourself.
Yes.
And I think that that's very helpful. So you don't feel like, okay, I'm not on my right path. A lot of people that are on the right path have gone through these troubling times to build up their careers and their brands. And a lot of times it's because of the infrastructure around you. So I think it's important for folks to study and be a student of the industry, a student of the game.
Yes.
If you are specifically talking about proving yourself, meaning whether it's you, your brand, a project that you have, just understand a lot of folks are going to say no.
Yeah.
I think some of it, like half of it is just understanding the terrain. It's like, yeah, you're going to get some no's. You're going to get a lot of no's.
Yeah.
I remember as an actor, one of the things that we were taught in early stages was like, for an audition, it's like go in there, have fun. Your job is to audition. All the rest of the stuff is just the fun that you have. And it got to a point where I'd be at auditions and the auditor would say, do you want to do that again? And I may have done 2 or 3 takes. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm out. It's like there are other things in life. Sometimes we get so caught up in this, in certain things that we forget to have a balance.
Yes.
And I think that's important. When you have that balance, it frees you to be a bit more, to have a little bit more fun. And a lot of times you can move differently. And sometimes when you let things go, it comes back to you. For me, it helps you to bounce back a little bit faster.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of dealing with the external stuff. Internally, you got to know your stuff. Like this is what I mean by you can talk about the industry and all the other stuff, but at a certain point, you still got to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
And I think that is the other part of it that gives you a level of confidence when you get hit with the no's, where it's like, not in an arrogant way, but just like, okay, I realize this may not be something you see right now.
Yeah.
The other thing that I learned in my own journey is that as a visionary, as a creative, we not only can be very focused on what we have in our heads, but the ability to articulate that is invaluable. So you might have an amazing idea, and the no that you got may not be because they wouldn't. It may just be because the presentation could have been tighter. So there are things that you just get to a point where you don't beat yourself down, but you realize, okay, there's a lot of folks that are lazy. They don't want to think outside of the box.
Yeah.
It's easier to just get their check and keep it moving than to say, like, let me think a little bit more on this, or let me introduce you to so-and-so. It's just kind of like, nah, keep it moving. So understanding that, it just gives you a certain level of grit, but also it hones your preparation skills. So one of the things that I would learn, like when I would go into a meeting with somebody, I'd research them, I'd look up what school they went to, if they were in a fraternity, sorority, like they play sports. Like I'm like researching stuff just to figure out, how do I make a genuine connection with this person?
Yes.
There's a lot of opportunities I've gotten haven't been because I was the smartest, the most talented. It was because I made the connection.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an invaluable skill for anyone that's growing, that's saying to themselves, like, I'm trying to prove myself. Well, I don't know if you have to if it's like, if you have to prove anything. I think it's like you have to prove yourself to you.
Yes.
And then make the connections with others, because people are gonna pick and choose what they want.
Yeah.
You could do everything right. It still may not work for somebody else.
And something really, really good that I want everybody to really hone in on is the fact that you need to be a student to the game. Be a student of your profession, of whatever you are trying to excel in, be great in. You have to study it day in and day out. Don't let it become your whole world. Like you said,
Right.
You still got to have a life, still go outside, touch grass. But you have to really study. Like one of the people that really inspires me, everybody here knows I love Tabitha Brown, and I read all her books, I watch all her podcast interviews, and I just love the fact that she was resilient. It took her 20 years to make it in the industry. Like it took her a long time to really get to where she is. So I think that's a very good gem that you dropped. So what do you think some of the biggest challenges that you faced has been with the Excel Film Fest, from having it from the first year to this past summer, having it the second year?
We tripled our ticket sales.
Okay.
We tripled attendance. We outgrew our space. We're already planning 2025 at a bigger location. But I realized going into it, and this is like my sports background, when you're training at a certain level, you train for what we call failure. Like, and failure is not failure in the same sense that, we may always describe it. It's just basically your limits. So you train to know what your limits are. So I knew when I launched Excel Fest that there were going to be gaps. We were not like funded by any major institution. We didn't have a marketing team, a PR plan, like anything like that. We were just using like our local resources and some relationships. So we knew that we could fill the gaps because I had already been in some of the other festival spaces, but I also knew that no matter how successful it was, it could be 10 times that with a couple of other things in place that we did not have.
Yes.
That understanding gave me a level of, again, give yourself a little grace. It's like I could take the blows a little bit more because I realized when I asked for criticism that I was going to get it. And I'm like, okay, I can see why you say we should do this. I can see why we should do this better. Like I was open to it.
Right.
And so we implemented a lot of those things. Some of the stuff was as small as the colors for the lanyards that we have, things that may go right over my head, all the way up to how many people are on stage at the same time. I looked at the length of our conversations, the attention spans of the audience. I started to learn, what conversations made the most sense and what conversations could flow from one to the other. It was such a crash course for me because I was wearing so many hats, from booking flights and hotels in the moment to guiding the conversation, to, you know, telling the moderator to wrap it up because we got so-and-so showing up and their Uber is early or late. Like, I'm doing all this at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's a big crash course for me. But the biggest thing I learned is that, oh man, you need a big team for some of that stuff.
Yes.
But I appreciated the process because I was able to be a better talent scout of that team because I had gone through certain things. Now, one of the other things that I intentionally took the risk on because I bet on myself and I was like, I know this thing is going to have gaps. I know it's stuff that can be improved upon. I get that. But if I can build this up enough to where others in the room can feel the possibilities, like even this year, we could have used another location, but I intentionally used the same location with the expectation that at certain points we'd have standing room only, and we did. And I'm like, I can get a bigger venue, but I want people to walk in here and feel like this space is too small. Like you all are outgrowing this. I don't want to do that 2 years.
Right.
but I want to do that at least
Only
1 year.
You're right.
I wanted people to feel like this is growing.
Yes.
And I kid you not, I lost track of how many people walked up to me and they were like, how can I be involved next year?
Wow.
I want to be on the team. I was getting emails weeks after the festival. It was like, I was at Excel. I want, you know, and for me, you know, you're always on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But people are still coming up today. And so I knew that in spite of the gaps that Excel had, if I could execute it to a certain level, it would be enough to show what's possible. And the analogy that I always hear is like when if a car breaks down on the side of the road and you put your hazards on, most cars drive past you. But if you get out of the car and start pushing, the likelihood of somebody coming to help you is higher. Doesn't guarantee anything. That's the other thing I'll tell anybody.
Yeah.
I always tell people that too. Don't just say, well, you got out and pushed it that somebody was going to help you. It doesn't mean that.
Right. Yeah.
You still may be pushing your own car.
Right.
But I also think what that does is it causes you to hold yourself to a certain level of accountability where you're not as reliant. And I believe that when people see that no matter what happens, he's going to keep going, it attracts people to you that you may have not known were watching.
Yes, yes. So speaking of that, what advice would you give to somebody who has a big idea? They have this vision that they're trying to execute, but they're afraid to bet on themselves, like you were saying.
First thing I would do is research if somebody's already doing it. That's the first thing I would do. Is there somebody that's already doing this thing? Are you first to market? And one of the things I've been very adamant about whenever I speak, you know, no matter what Excel does or Creative Cypher does, I'm like, listen, there's nothing new under the sun. So I try not to get caught up in the hype. There, we've got ancestors, we got people that have fought the good fight, we've got people that have been there, done that in some iteration or fashion. So I'm never going to sit up here and say, man, I just thought of this. No, I was inspired. You know, other people have done other things. But what that will do for you if you have this great idea is that you can learn from others. You know, even if you can't meet that person or don't know that person, this is where being a student comes into play. You can do some research. You can figure out, man, what were the pitfalls for that person? And if you're fortunate enough to connect with them, maybe you know, one of the things I was very keen on was building advisory boards and building think tanks and just putting myself out there with the understanding that everybody's not going to understand you. And then some people are not going to agree with you. Like, be open to it, because what you want at the end of the day is growth. You don't want people to just say, man, Troy, every idea you have is amazing. No, I got some people around me that'll say, Troy, yo, that was whack. You know, like in a respectful way, because you know it's all love. But and it is important, as a side note, it is important to make sure you have the right people around you. Because you know, if you got the right people around you, just because they tell you something you don't want to hear right now doesn't mean it wasn't what you needed to hear, right? Like, if you got the wrong people, everybody doesn't have your best interest at heart, right? There are people out there that are going to hate on you, that are going to speak down, they're going to, you know, they'll send negative energy your way. But just because somebody gives you a critique, if they're really for you, then take the note. That's one of the other things I've learned from sports and acting. It's like, take the note. Nobody can tell you who you are, but they can tell you what they see.
Yep. Love that. So speaking of advisory boards, you talked about the importance of really just taking the time to develop that community of people around you that can push you to be better. What advice can you give to somebody who's looking for that mentor that can push them? How do they find that, and what should that mentor be able to instill in them?
I always learn you should be a mentor and have a mentor. And I've been very fortunate to, I've noticed that sometimes I've mentored at organizations, and that organization has folks that have already been a part of it. And then I find a mentor myself because of somebody else that's on that board or that's been affiliated with the organization. Similarly to being a talent scout, I think it's important to research people who've done what you want to do.
Yes.
And I would say the majority of the people you want folks that have done what you want to do, but then also some folks that are not in that space. Some of the best advice that I've gotten have been people that have nothing to do with entertainment, but they've got, amazing business minds. All of that can help. But I definitely think that if you do a little research and figure out if there are any organizations or any projects or any programs out there that are similar to yours, and see who founded it, see who runs it, and build from there. I also think that a lot of times if you just start, sometimes that momentum just kind of attracts people to you. I mean, I walked in here today and just ran into folks. I didn't know, that Krispy Kreme was partnered with McDonald's. With McDonald's, and then
I just found that out too.
The folks bringing up the stuff, we knew each other from Common Ground Foundation and all kinds of stuff. It was like, that was all because I was coming to TrueStar. There's a bunch of stuff that just kind of going to happen. And what I will say is that being present is important. So, you vet the places that you get invited to. You can't be everywhere all the time. It's practical. Right. You want to make sure you're spending your time wisely, but a lot of times just being present creates a ton of opportunities for you.
Really agree with that. So to finish out, give us an idea of what your biggest dream for the Excel Film Festival looks like. You could have your dream actors, your dream producers, your dream moderators, your dream venue, dream city. What does that look like to you?
Man, I'm working on that right now for next year.
Yes.
Let's see. I mean, my dream moderator had a show in Chicago for a long time, and is at the pinnacle of it all.
Yes.
So to have her here, that would be, I can't think of it like beyond that point. There's a bunch of other folks that I could think of that would be great on stage. But if we're talking about like the dream, and she would be interviewing two other folks from Chicago that, were legends in politics, and are now filmmakers themselves. That would be my dream panel to close out the festival.
Yeah.
Outside of that, the big thing is impact. Like, I want to make sure that the festival is something that's longstanding, that accelerates the careers of rising storytellers. We are now moving from the 3-day model to a 7-day model.
Right.
We want to make sure that it becomes a magnet for opportunities when you think of other destination festivals where people are planning a year in advance to travel to certain festivals. That's what we want and are building Excel to become. I also believe strongly that it will be an amazing resource and opportunity for the city of Chicago. Because as folks in the creative economy invest into the TV film business, infrastructure is great, but a lot of times you can have a shell without a soul. And so what we do, we're filling that up. Like, it's becoming an attractive thing built here in Chicago. And we're really excited about it, but we want it to become a destination. I'm happy to say, of course, we had Lorenz Tate, the Tate brothers last year.
Yes.
They're partners with us this year.
Nice.
Or partners with us moving forward. So the likelihood that you're going to see more and more celebs visiting Chicago in August is becoming more and more likely.
Yes, so I definitely hope to be there. Excel Film Fest changed my life this past summer too. It was definitely amazing. But outside of film, do you have any other aspirations, long-term goals that you want to share?
I've got 2 amazing kids, 4, and one will be 2 next month. My biggest thing was I wanted to build something that created legacy, that had an impact. But I'm one of the first to say, I am working on succession plans and making sure that things can operate fully, so I can spend more time in other areas.
Nice.
Like I said, I was an athlete for a significant part of my life and became a coach afterwards. So I want to explore more opportunities in the athletic space, especially as my kids start sports now.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I wanted to build something that I could eventually build a team that could help me remove some hats. So that's the phase that I'm in right now. So I'm excited about that. And as Excel grows, back to the earlier point, those resources grow, and it allows me to executive produce a lot of dope content.
Nice.
So that's the other space that I'm in now.
Nice. All right, guys, there we have it. This concludes another great episode of Empowered and Prepared. I caught some gems. I hope that y'all did too, from Troy Pryor, none other than. Again, this is another episode of Empowered and Prepared. And remember, it's never too late to lock in. I'll catch y'all in the next one.